It's the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 192. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to our podcast. We're talking Gopher football this week with the Gopher Guru Daniel House, who follows Golden Gopher football as closely as anyone, and especially from an evaluation and progress standpoint. That means this is a great time to have Daniel on. We'll get his assessment of this 4-2 Golden Gopher football team at the halfway point of the regular season. We'll tongue-in-cheek call this the Halfway House. That's House's midterm report on the Gopher season at the halfway point. Our Go Gopher podcast presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. Longtime Gopher sports supporter Cub is also proud to sponsor the Go Gopher podcast. In a hurry? Don't worry. Cub delivers. Get fresh meat, produce, everyday essentials, and more delivered to your door. Cub is the official grocer of the Golden Gophers and proud to support Gopher athletics for more than 20 years. Shop happy. The Go Gopher podcast is also presented by onX Maps. Find out how to download the onX Hunt app for free by listening to the Go Gopher podcast. We're podcasting episode 192 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We invite you to subscribe to the Go Gopher podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any time. You can go back and have a listen to previous Go Gopher podcast. Last week, for example, we talked Golden Gopher basketball with transfer player Cade Tyson. A terrific chat. You can go back and have a listen if you missed it. This week, it's Golden Gopher football and a breakdown from the Gopher Guru, Daniel House, who will join me next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
Know what the happiest bird is? Chicken. Cub fried chicken. Wait, let me rephrase that. Know what bird makes people happiest? Cub fried chicken. Crispy, crunchy, juicy, perfectly seasoned. It's the kind of chicken that disappears faster than you can say, 8-piece, please. Or, let's be real, maybe 12-piece. Because when it comes to fried chicken, more just means more happy. So if you're shopping chicken, shop Cub fried chicken and shop happy.
It's episode 192 of the Go Gopher podcast, and it's the halfway point of the Gopher football season. Hard to believe, 6 games in, 6 regular season games left, and I've jokingly called this the halfway house because Daniel House is here, and we're at the halfway point, and the Gopher Guru at gophersguru.com. Daniel, how are you?
I'm doing well. Football season is in full swing, and now we're starting to learn a little more about these teams, which is exciting.
Yeah, and it's unique. This has been an interesting year. Tuesday on the Coaches Show with PJ Fleck, Guardsy and I joked, like, man, the year has seemed to fly by. Like, it's hard to believe it's already half over. PJ took issue with it, saying it feels like it's going on forever. And I'm sure if you're the coach or a player and you lost at Cal and you had to sit on a 2-week bye or 2 weeks with a bye mixed in, maybe that felt like a month. But to me, the season is flowing by. It's one of those weird years. I still don't have a great read on this team halfway through. So that's why I thought it'd be good to get somebody that knows football on to find out what their read is, because it's probably a little better than mine. First question, do you think it's gone fast or do you think it's gone slow just for the fun of it?
I think it's gone at about the pace that I would expect. Medium, like slow, not too fast. I'd say just about what I typically expect. But it's been a weird season from a competitive parity standpoint in the Big Ten, and you see it every week. These games are close. UCLA looking like they were going to be at the bottom of the conference and then figuring it out after making some changes. And it just shows you that unique things happen in college football, and you got to be, ready to evaluate exactly, what happened. How are they doing this? So that's
Yeah.
been the fun part of this year.
And all of a sudden, Northwestern has won 3 straight, and they've placed themselves in this pack of teams that could
Yes.
make some noise. I don't think the TV folks probably figured they'd put a 6-day hold on the games this weekend to find out what games they wanted next week. But with how it has unfolded, as you just explained, some games that maybe they didn't think would be great competitive games, now they want to see what the outcomes are here. Because frankly, if Nebraska happens to win here Friday and Northwestern, and I forget who they play this weekend, wins, that becomes one of the top 2 or 3 games in the conference based on records, and we wouldn't have figured that 2 weeks ago.
No, and I mean Northwestern's playing Purdue
Yeah.
at home, so
Yeah.
I mean there is a chance that matchup's a little better than they were anticipating record wise.
Yeah.
So it just shows you the Big Ten right now is a fun conference to watch, and you got to have your A game. Studying all these teams and watching it in depth. I don't think the scheming and coaching has been better in the conference as a whole. So every decision you make in game, managing clock, scheming, making adjustments, it all matters because you gotta find small edges to be able to be competitive in this landscape of Big Ten football.
Yeah, it's why coaches like PJ Fleck decide to tell their team don't go to bed till midnight when you're playing on the West Coast, because every little thing could make a difference. You think about it, like these are 20-year-old kids. Does it really matter what time they go to bed? And while generally you might say no, if that was potentially the difference, then it was worth it. Now, as it turned out, they don't win that game, but that's why coaches do what they're doing, right? Every little edge you can possibly get, even if it's a 1% edge that you think you might gain, it might be worth every second you pour into it.
Absolutely. So, that's the challenge moving forward is as this landscape changes, every day there's something new. So as a program, not just on the field, but off the field, you got to be constantly thinking about edges because the league just keeps getting better and better and people are getting smarter, and it's very fun to watch week to week basis.
Well, the Gophers right now are 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the Big Ten. I don't think there's any doubt the next 6 games will be harder than the previous 6 games on the schedule, so we'll have those discussion points. What is just generally your assessment of this team 6 games in? And like I said, I'm having a bit of a trouble getting a handle yet on them at this point because it has been kind of a wacky first 6 games. What's your thoughts and assessment?
My takeaway overall is just I wanted to see how Drake Lindsay would play the first few games. And I thought with all the different flavors of defense he's gone against through the first few games, he's responded well. And I'd say the big thing that I notice is just his poise and comfort in terms of like when an unconventional look is thrown out there, he can diagnose and know where to go with the ball. He's got a great feel for space and being able to throw and anticipate into zone windows and make the right decision. And I think that's been the big takeaway to me is that it doesn't look too big for him. And that's what I wanted to see through the first, 6 or so games is how does Drake respond to all the different challenges he's faced. And I asked him after the game just the information he's been able to gather, how much fun it's been for him to play against different flavors of defense every single week. And now I'd say this week's probably the biggest challenge, Grim, in terms of like exotic, multiple attacking defense. It's probably in that wheelhouse of Ohio State, but yet it's different. There's some flavors and similarities, but it's a unique defense. So he's going to continue to see challenges moving forward. He's going to continue banking away information to improve. I think the big thing now is as you get later into the season, we all know running the football is important. Can you find a way to establish some consistency, running the ball? I think that would help Drake a lot.
Yeah.
Because right now, you look at the offense, they've been able to pass the ball, with the quick game and some matchups to be able to stay ahead of the sticks and, find a rhythm offensively. There's been lulls in the game where they've needed to find a spark. And, they're able to hit on the explosive in the Rutgers game if they're getting down 14-0. The screen sequence in the Purdue game to find a jolt. But I think that's going to be the big thing here is figuring out how to establish some consistency in the run game. I think defensively, I think fans have to kind of understand what is the goal of the game plan every week. So, for example, last week it was, you don't want to get beat in the pass game with the wide receivers. They had an RPO game, they had vertical attack ability with the wide receiver room. It was the same kind of deal with Rutgers. You're sitting back, rolling zones. You're trying to promote the offense having to go on long, sustained, well executed drives. And hopefully down the road in that drive, that maybe they'll make a mistake. And I think you saw that takeaways were the difference in the Purdue game. And when you look at the advanced metrics, it's actually interesting because they actually had their second best pass defense success rate against Purdue. It was their worst rush defense success rate, but when you have lighter boxes, you're playing more zones. There's favorable looks to run into occasionally. If you miss a tackle here or there, it's magnified because you get your defensive backs playing from depth. So I think that's what people maybe miss the mark on is like, what are the strengths of the other opponent? How are you scheming to minimize the strengths of the opponent? And maybe, that might lead to a weakness in another area as you're trying to determine, the best path.
Yeah, I mean, this defense isn't so good like, say, Ohio State has where, they can shut down the run and shut down the pass. I think what you're hitting on a little bit is if you're going to shut down Purdue's passing game, you might give up a 100-yard game to Devin Mockabee, but at the end of the day, you might win the football game, and you have to roll the dice a little bit that they won't stay committed to the run because they haven't stayed committed to the run all year, talking about Purdue. And yes, eventually they quit handing the ball off, and in some key spots, you call a halfback pass that gets intercepted, you call a couple of weird plays, one turns into a sack, and then you miss a field goal, and the next thing you know, you win the game after making a couple of big plays.
That's exactly it. And I think that's what you're promoting is, okay, we'll keep changing the coverage picture. We're going to roll coverages and do some different stuff. And eventually maybe the team will make a mistake. You get your hands on the football. And that's why I think, there's been some opportunities like tip balls that they haven't been able to, come down with in other games. The takeaways just weren't there in some of the matchups where last week the takeaways were there, able to get them, and it swung the tide of the game. So that's what I think fans have to understand is like going into the game, what are the strengths of the opponent? And Minnesota has to pivot based on that. Like you say, strengths and weaknesses kind of play into how you scheme a game. So I think that they definitely have to figure out, on defense, how to generate a pass rush with four. That'll open up some more defensive opportunities, and then also being able to tackle and play with really good tight fundamentals and run defense. Because when you do play with more of those zones in the back end, your fundamentals have to be tight and precise in the front seven.
When the season started in August, if I'd have said the Gophers would be 4-2 and 2-1 after 6 games, you would have said what?
I felt like that's about right, based on just like the changes they had, trying to find themselves, learning an identity. But I also think that I felt like a couple of those games could have went either way. You had to make the winning plays at the end, a takeaway here, a sack there, being able to generate the negative plays when you needed them most or able to propel them in those Rutgers-Purdue games. And you go back and look at the Purdue matchup, and statistically, you play that game like 100 times, Purdue probably wins at 77 of those matchups. But you're able to get those takeaways, and that makes a huge difference in swinging the outcome. So I would say, there's some things that could have swung those games either way, but to be at that spot right now allows you, with the last 6 games to put yourself in a position to have some options to, improve and maybe get yourself in that bowl game position, improve your bowl game position if you can get to that point.
Did you think at any point, let's say again going back to August and knowing you had a redshirt freshman quarterback, that a PJ Fleck coach team with a redshirt freshman quarterback would throw the ball 86 times over a 2-week stretch?
I felt more confident than most in Drake, just in seeing his strengths and weaknesses, where, he was at in his development. His traits fit the system very well and how they want to do stuff. I did feel like their running game, they had some, new faces along the offensive line, which changes things, especially with this type of scheme they run. The run game is complex. There's a lot of ID stuff that you have to figure out. Uh, Drake's still learning all that stuff at the line of scrimmage, trying to get them into the best run play. So I think, I felt like it would be more of a learning process, but I've always said, throw to score, run to win. You can actually throw the football and it's going to open up elements of the run game. Teams are going to start defending you differently. So you can pivot to something that you feel is more of a strength and try to eventually get to the point where you can make, the run game tick because defenses are playing to take away the pass a little bit more. So I do think that's going to be the thing moving forward is can they figure out how to become physical and generate movement along the offensive line. It's a different type of offensive line unit, in terms of they're more of an athletic type of group. They're not as, big physical, as we've seen in the past. I think that matchup, the Purdue game, I felt like their bigger body types, stout, agile, active group presented some more challenges in these teams that are more like the twitchy lateral quickness type defensive line. So that's going to be the challenge moving forward here is they got some quality opponents that play good defense coming up on this.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll clarify real quickly. I said 40 or 86 passes over a 2-week stretch. Really, it's a 2-week home stretch, 2 home games with Rutgers and Purdue with 41 attempts and 45 attempts. I think Ohio State was in between that where they only threw it 23 times. But that game's almost like a one-off with the talent gap and different things going on with that one. It's hard to take much from it. But back to your point on the offensive line and finding this groove in the run game. I don't know how to critically watch. Like I can watch and I'll say, boy, Darius Taylor just lost 2 yards, and I'll watch the play 4 times, and I'm looking, and I'm like, well, every lineman is blocking somebody, but this guy from the weak side has come in unblocked, or a linebacker has filled a gap. What did they have to do to try to figure out, one, maybe how to get everybody blocked and how to create space for Darius Taylor to find some room?
Yeah, a lot of it is just getting into the right look. You've heard that a lot from people when they've been asked about the run game, in press conferences and stuff, is just at the line of scrimmage being able to assess what you got and check into the right run play and then have everybody execute it up. I thought there were a couple times it looked like they checked into something and maybe it didn't get relayed quite well. And led to, a negative play or, not a positive outcome. So I think that that's going to be what Minnesota's focusing on here is just trying to figure out the best offensive line combination. I mean, they've been moving guys around the past few games, trying to figure out, week to week, what do you need? Do you need more of the physical skill set to be able to hold up against, the edges? Like what type of defense are you playing against and which combination gives you the best chance at success? And, I don't know, maybe they're going to start eventually as the season going on, bring some younger guys in to see what they have, especially at the guard spots. I'm just interested to kind of see what path they take on the offensive line. And I know they're going to have to run the ball later in the season, especially when it gets colder here and they're playing outside.
Yeah, and it does seem, as you mentioned earlier, it doesn't seem like this is one of those mauling, where they just maul the line of scrimmage 4 yards downfield and, anybody can run that way. There just hasn't been the push maybe that we've seen in the past with this group right now, and that's got to change. Probably generally that would be nice if you could just push the full line of scrimmage, but it just seems like everybody's collapsing to the middle because there's no defensively, including the linebackers and the defensive end, there seems to be no threat of outside stuff, so they're just not worried about containing anything and just crashing into the point of the handoff.
Well, and there's some stuff too when you think about it, how teams are playing Minnesota. Eventually, you're going to have to win some matchups on the outside, especially if they're going to play man coverage and you got more guys in the box. If you can win on the outside, then you're going to take some pressure off the run game as well. I think that's going to be the challenge too moving forward is you're going to see a lot of teams being very aggressive and physical with Minnesota's wide receivers. And can you get to the point where you're able to maybe generate some rubs and get guys open versus man coverage and just win one-on-one matchups, because then that changes how the defense is going to play you. Maybe they play more zone, you got favorable box counts. So I think it kind of plays hand in hand that like the run and pass games play off one another. And so Minnesota has to figure out a way to, win one-on-ones on the outside and be able to, execute in the run game, get into the right look, and, just play multi-dimensional football on offense, because that's going to be what, wins games later in the season. Because I think it amps up. You get late into October, you get into November, the physicality becomes even more important, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah, and even when I was discussing like not a threat on the outside, I wasn't even generally talking receivers. Just watching it, there's no bootleg. There's like a defensive end has nothing to worry about. He can immediately crash to try to tackle Darius Taylor on a straight handoff. Where if there's a bootleg, if there's a fake handoff on a jet action, which we've seen in the past, something to keep people away from the immediate point of attack, as opposed to I watch and the whole thing collapses because there is no threat of anything. An end, a safety, a linebacker has no worries about any significant secondary look from the handoff.
Moving the pocket is something that Minnesota started, in the second half a little bit as aggressive and downhill as that rush was getting. And I felt like that was something they might do. They did it a little bit in the second half. It's something that they might try to do this week too, considering Nebraska, their defensive style and how they play the game. I could see that. I also think like misdirection in a run game, like gap scheme principles, where you're able to pull guys, and do some different stuff might be able to help. And you find some creative wrinkles to kind of build off some of the base stuff that you've done. But, you also have to execute the base stuff before you can start, adding in a bunch of different wrinkles. And I think that's where, there's a lot of different the pie chart of, where to distribute this kind of goes a lot of different directions. So I think that's where the coaching staff has to figure out what schemes give the best chance of success, and how can you maybe make some tweaks to give yourself a chance to be more efficient and consistent in the run game.
Let me mention a sponsor here quick. This is the Go Gopher Podcast. We want to talk about onX Maps, and specifically today about onX Hunt. If you've ever driven past a piece of land and wondered who owns that, or maybe you need to know exactly where a property line is, well, that's where onX Hunt comes in, and it's not just for hunters. There are folks using onX for their jobs every day throughout the country. Farmers and ranchers mapping out their fields, wildland firefighters navigating rough terrain, construction workers needing to know where property lines run, and the app also offers something for everyone. If you need the best land ownership map, aerial imagery, and property boundaries in your pocket, onX Hunt is the tool for the job, and you can try it for free for 7 days. Download onX Hunt in the app or Google Play Store, or online at onxmaps.com/hunt to get started. That's onxmaps.com/hunt. Speaking of web pages, gophersguru.com is a great source for all kinds of gopher info. Daniel House is the Gopher Guru. Give us, for those, I know a lot of people follow you, but every now and then we'll get some new people that don't always listen and don't always pay close attention to everything. So tell us about gophersguru.com and what people can get.
Independent local football coverage of the Gophers and other sports as well when time allows. Basically a next-gen dive, giving fans a perspective of maybe teaching them about the game of football, what they saw, how Minnesota's coaching the game, some advanced stats kind of simplified down to help fans maybe look at the game through a different lens. Just every week you'll get a breakdown of the offense and defense, some of the things that Minnesota was trying to do, what was the opponent accomplishing schematically, and how did Minnesota adjust, things like that, and then previewing every game. So you'll get an in-depth look at some things to watch for every single week. Like last week I was talking about, the big, stout, agile, active defensive line, how that presented some challenges with, Minnesota being more of an athletic, twitchy type of offensive line, that might have been a matchup to watch. So those type of things, you'll get that on the website. $5 a month gets you access to all the content. So it'd be awesome if fans could support, local content, local football.
Yeah, and good content at that. And really, right, $1.25 a week. What better deal can you get than that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go to Starbucks, you're spending a lot of money to get a drink. So
yeah, you get a whole month of Gopher's Guru for less than 1 cup of coffee at Starbucks or Caribou. Absolutely. And part of what you do is, as you mentioned, it's local. You have angles that other people don't cover. I noticed you had a little bit of a piece this week, including some video of the coverage disguises that Minnesota used to pull off a couple of their interceptions, including the key, basically game-clinching one from Coy Parrish. So So don't give the whole house away, no pun intended, but give us a little a note on that, and people can go look and watch.
It was fun because I was watching that and I thought back to I watched a football clinic like 2 or 3 years ago, NFL defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo when he's with the Bengals. And I knew that he loved to run this specific coverage, this disguise. And so when I saw Minnesota do it, they implemented it in the Ohio State game. If fans go back and watch, like in the start of the second quarter, Ohio State ran an RPO and they had a big gain off of it. It just, wasn't executed super well. But then you come back and you try it again in the Purdue game, and you're able to get Coy around the box and blitz him downhill, get your hands on the ball, make a play. So we were able to talk about that plus the interception at the end of the game, how that was the same type of look. They just made a little bit of tweak with Coy from a disguise standpoint and able to, make a play on the ball, get the pick six, and turn the tide of the game. So it was an example of like maybe not executing it well in the previous game, coming back, trying it again, and then being able to get 2 takeaways off of it. So encourage fans to go out on the site and take a look at it because it was kind of fun to see the evolution and growth of it and how it dramatically impacted the outcome of the game, being able to have that disguise element with Coy.
Yeah, no doubt. GophersGuru.com. Nebraska, you've referenced their defense a number of times here. That's the opponent Friday Night Football this week, 7 o'clock at Huntington Bank Stadium. What about their pass defense makes them so good? Because I think if you look analytically, right, they're one of the top pass defenses in the country.
Yes, and one of the top pass defenses and, all the significant metrics that you look at when you study the game. This is a tough defense because they're multiple, they're versatile, they're attacking. You look at 3 down, 4 down, sometimes 5 down fronts. They'll show like a 3 down front and walk a guy down like McCullough down to the rush end position. So they're doing a lot of different stuff in the front, blitzing, stunting, moving guys, showing different fronts. And then in the back end, you'll see a lot of different coverage presentations. They're disguising and rolling coverage, forcing the quarterback, to make split-second decisions. I think they do a good job of like not showing their disguise until the ball snapped, and then the quarterback's holding the ball just a little bit of longer than normal. So then the rush and coverage are working off of each other very well. So, post-snap recognition is going to be very important. You go back and you watch what they did to Aiden Childs in the Michigan State game. He was an absolute ruin. I mean, he was holding the ball, trying to process the coverage and get the protection set. It gave him a lot of trouble. So I would say that's the big thing is they just do a good job of mixing stuff up, showing a coverage presentation, and then you're going, man, that's not what I thought it was going to be. So Minnesota has to be ready for a lot of different stuff.
And certainly a challenge for a redshirt freshman quarterback, right? Would you mentioned there is a little bit of comparison with Ohio State's defense, what they do and what Nebraska does. Would you say this is a bigger challenge from a quarterback processing standpoint than even Ohio State?
I'd say they're both similar in terms of, disguise. I think, the speed of Ohio State's defense is on another level, which, makes it a little bit different. And some of the schematic elements are slightly different, but the multiplicity and mix of different looks is certainly similar in the sense that, like, you better be ready for pre and post snap changes because they are very good at disguising. And John Butler's done a nice job. I mean, they lost a lot of pass rush personnel last year, but they're able to really invest in the coverage piece of it, and it's helped them, be efficient defensively.
Now, you mentioned John Butler, the defensive coordinator. He's been with that staff now for a couple of years, but it's his first year calling plays as the defensive coordinator. And he was one time a defensive coordinator at Penn State and was a coaching staff member on the Tim Brewster staff here years ago as the special teams coordinator. And he oversaw some recruiting way back when. That had to be, 2007, 8 back in the day. I think he and Brewster went all the way back to when Brewster was at Texas, and I think John was a grad assistant. I remember him. I'll be honest, until Monday when I started diving in on Nebraska, I did not realize that John was – I knew he was at Nebraska, but I did not realize that he had been promoted there. So he was always kind of an aggressive recruiter even back then, and I think it looks like it's it flows into his coaching style as well in terms of the what he's doing defensively here. Pretty aggressive look.
Yeah, and he's brought a lot of NFL principles with him. That's the thing. These defenses in college football have a lot of NFL flair, many of them now, which, hey, it's tough because, when you run an NFL style defense, the pressures hit just as fast, but very rarely do you have the quarterback with NFL level processing to handle the front and the coverage picture change in a rapid split second. I think that's the difference, that why teams are going towards that NFL flair, because they can gain a distinct advantage.
All right, let's talk about the Huskers offense. I want to start, most everyone wants to start with the quarterback, which I'll ask you about in a second, Dylan Raiola, but I want to ask about Dana Holgorsen, who's been a head coach at multiple places, a Mike Leach disciple. Is the offense Nebraska's running right now, is it similar to what Mike Leach, the late great Mike Leach, ran during his heyday at Texas Tech and Washington State and later on at Mississippi State?
There's some elements that are similar passing game concept wise, but he's definitely flared in the run game with some pro style stuff, and the air raid. Everybody kind of classifies the air raid. Yeah, it's a certain style, but now a lot of those concepts are melded into the pro game as well. Like, you would argue Mike Leach is probably the most influential pass game mind overall in football history. I mean, it's hard to argue that he isn't, because you watch a game and you see, at least a few concepts that Mike popularized showing up in games. So I think Dana's melded, the pro style, air raid, all those things together to put together a system that translates quite well to the Big Ten. I look at their passing game, just how well structured it is. It's quarterback friendly. Being able to layer concepts over the course of the season, over the course of games, keep the defense guessing, show something and make a subtle tweak. And it gives the defense a lot of things to prepare for. And I think that their overall quick game from a design standpoint, the spacing is great. And they're able to run the ball, in high leverage spots. They're not afraid to, mix it up. They'll run some counter, they'll run some zone schemes. It's very well structured offense. And I thought the Michigan State game was a great example of Dana Holgorsen, just his experience, able to call huge plays and big moments when they needed it. And maybe that's what they didn't have in the past at Nebraska, like a guy that could close out the game and get in his bag and dip into the bag of tricks just when they needed it most. And that's been the big thing, along with special teams. Their special teams has been a lot better. And so I think that's helped Nebraska.
Yeah, they had made a name for themselves losing close games, and now they've won a couple of close games here and have won some blowouts as well. Their non-conference schedule outside of the quote unquote neutral site game, which was just down the road from Lincoln in Kansas City against Cincinnati, the non-conference schedule was pretty non-existent, but they've been pretty good. All right, Dylan Raiola, the quarterback, outside of him, imitating and trying to be the imposter of Patrick Mahomes, what do you see from him, and what will be a challenge for the Minnesota defense?
Significant strides. Just the system's helped him a lot. Being able to put him in positions where, he's got a lot of options. He's able to work through, all the reads on the field. He looks so much more comfortable. Last year, their quick game just was not where it needed to be. And when Dana came in, he tried to fix it. And they showed some growth, but now the passing attack being the way that it is, being able to stress teams at all three levels with the screens, the intermediate game, they got some RPO stuff in the offense as well, along with, the play action, being able to stretch teams at all three levels. But you look at Dylan, he just looks like he's in command. He's able to change the pace of throws, being able to, when he needs to layer the ball in, he can take a little off of it, throw the receiver open. But he also can drive those footballs, and he needs to drive like a corner route and make that throw into a tight window. He can do it. There's just so many impressive throws when you watch him on film. And if you try to pressure him, he's very big and slippery, and he's kind of tough to bring down. So you have to take a good angle. You have to be able to contain the pocket and not let him slip out and make plays. I think that he's just showing a lot of growth and just command, seeing the field, looking comfortable. And then, like I say, the throw tempo variation is something that I've noticed a lot, being able to understand the type of throw he needs to make based on, the route type, and then, responding to the coverage and knowing where to go with the football. And I think that's a credit to Dana Horgelson just building a system that suits his strengths quite well.
Last one for you here, Daniel House, gophersguru.com. You've watched the film on Nebraska. You've watched, obviously, all of the Gopher games. So what do you see Friday night? And give me your score prediction, if you have one, as we record here on this Wednesday.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I think the short week complicates it a little bit from a preparation standpoint, Grimmer. Like, this is a multiple defense that creates a lot of challenges, and it's sometimes you would like to have the most amount of time possible to prep. I think Nebraska is going to come out and try to run the ball heavily based on how Minnesota might scheme defensively. I mean, tackling is going to be a major point of emphasis in this game. So I would say this matchup's going to come down to if your defense can play with good tight fundamentals in every single area. And then offensively, you should be able to run the ball a little bit. I think that might be a little bit of a weakness in Nebraska's overall defense. I would say if I had to predict, I would say Nebraska probably wins about 28-17.
28-17. That's not the news we wanted to hear, Mr. House, but I get it. I mean, that's what the analytics indicate, and the point spread has been fluctuating. I don't know what's going on with that. It's been 5, it's been 10, it's been 8. By the time somebody hears this, who knows what it'll be as we get out there. But my Zoom is telling me I got 30 seconds left, so I appreciate your time as always, Daniel, as we have the halfway house here at the halfway point. Gophersguru.com. We'll see you at the stadium, Daniel, on Saturday. Or I beg your pardon, we'll see you at the stadium on Friday.
Thanks, Grim.
All right, take care. He is Daniel House. It's gophersguru.com. And this has been episode 192. My thanks to the Gopher Guru, Daniel House, for taking time to join me this week and giving us his evaluation of the Golden Gopher football team at the midway point of the season. I hope you enjoyed hearing Daniel's insights as much as I did. Episode 192 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com. Cub is a proud supporter of Gopher Athletics for over 20 years and a proud sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm. Cub, bigger savings on the items you love. Shop happy. And OnX Hunt also sponsors our show, Happy Hunting from OnX Maps. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please right now click that subscribe button to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any time. And please share the link to the podcast with others so they can subscribe and listen as well. And if you enjoyed this week's show, please let us know with some positive feedback on your social media channels. We'll talk again next week.
Know what happy is? Veggies. Crunchy, crispy, colorful, seasonal, aromatic, juicy veggies. Produce at its freshest. Cub produce. Best produce, period. Guaranteed to make you happy or will replace it. No questions asked. Because good produce makes veggie lovers happy. Just remember, fresh, happy. Stale, limp, and wilted, not happy. You want to make a veggie lover happy? Shop Cub for produce. And shop happy.